There's some things we just, we don't, as human beings, we don't know, but as meditators, as practitioners, we begin to get a sense that, yes, we are all connected, and everything that we do positive helps positive. Likewise, everything we do negative can help negative. We can support negative, we can support positive. So we have to make the choice. Okay, so let's get started, please. So Debbie, if you will begin, that'd be great.
I will indeed. We'll start with the prayers first. All Mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All Mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in this state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All Mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all Mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all Mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all Mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. And bear with me 1 minute, please, while I share something else here. Oops. Yeah. So I would like to just share a little bit more about the sequence of relax, release, and bring the mind home prompts, followed by the way we've been reversing the sequence. The reason is it actually encompasses the whole Buddhist path in a rather wonderful way. And most importantly for us right now, I've found in my practice that perhaps lets us consider some of the different ways to work with the Bardo Thodol along the path. And of course, I'm inevitably sharing from the perspective of my own practice, but you should edit freely as you listen in terms of your own practice. And I'd love to hear how others are incorporating the Bardo Thodol into their practice as we move ahead. So just quickly, I use this framework as part of my daily practice. I end up emphasizing different prompts based on the me that shows up on the cushion in the morning and what comes up during practice. And I also use it very essentially off the cushion as an aid to integration throughout the day. I find that just taking a minute to run through the sequence quickly can be a mini meditation, or even just the quick thought of bring the mind home in the most essential form. So we've learned that at one level, the Bardo Thodol is an expression of universal truth. And as such, just like we were discussing before we began tonight, we're told that it's not just for Buddhists. And what I think is when we go through the initial sequence of relax, release, and bring the mind home, we're really creating an outer environment for a basic mindfulness practice. And maybe that does indeed make the Bardo Thodol relevant and useful to someone of any faith tradition or none who has a mindfulness practice of some sort. And we can look a bit more closely to see maybe how that might happen. When we relax, we're working with our posture and our outer breath. I find that helps support the unimpeded flow of prana or chi, or inner breath, whatever you might want to call it. And the instructions are very simple: to assume your best meditation posture, to breathe naturally. But of course, some people go further and explore different limb limbering and lumbar mobilization exercises to develop a spine that is strong and straight and flexible and able to remain motionless for long meditation periods. And some people choose to do more involved breath work to return to more natural ways of breathing and consciously cultivate what some consider to be a meditation breath. And then when we release, we're really intentionally changing our relations to our thoughts and our emotions. And I find that over time, I settle and developed a more detached perspective on them. I get a little distance from them so that I identify less with them. And it's a process of learning to neither suppress nor indulge them. And I've always rather liked the analogy of a hostess who's greeting a lot of party guests at her front door. And she's very graciously but briefly greeting each guest, pointing them into the buffet table before she turns to greet the next guest. So she doesn't ignore anyone, but she also doesn't abandon her post at the front door and follow a guest to the buffet. It's kind of like that. To bring the mind home is to have spacious present awareness while still being grounded in your basic human physical being and its sensory perceptions. The goal is deep stillness combined with a kind of dynamic focus. And I find this comes from just resting my attention on something, often my breath, while noticing whenever my mind wanders off, which is often, and bringing it back. And recognizing that this noticing and bringing back actually is the practice. It's these constant, small, mindful adjustments that keep the stillness from becoming dull and stagnant. And one useful analogy is to imagine you're in a dark room trying to look at a painting hanging on the wall, and you're holding a lit candle. To see the painting clearly, the light from the candle has to be both bright and not flickering too much. The light of attention is not enough if the attention is constantly wavering. And the stable light is not enough if the light is too dim. So in this context, I found that reading the Bardo Thodol carefully, clearly, and as best I can with good pronunciation is itself a mindfulness practice. And as such, as we were all saying at the beginning tonight, it works and has benefit for ourselves. And perhaps whether the reader is Buddhist or not. And after all, time and time again, the Bardo Thodol itself reminds us of how important it is not to be distracted in the Bardos. And Lance has told us time and time again, if we don't practice being undistracted now, while we're alive, there's really no reason to assume it'll suddenly become easier after we die. But maybe more than that, a mindful reader can benefit someone who is dying or who has died by creating a calm and peaceful environment. And at a time when their consciousness is likely to be confused and anxious, maybe that peaceful space the reader holds can calm them enough to hear the words and connect in some way with the opportunities for liberation. And after all, it is the heartfelt, compassionate intention to benefit the dying or deceased person that makes the space you're holding a truly sacred and noble space. So at the level of basic and universal mindfulness practice, we can see how it might benefit Buddhists and non-Buddhists alike. But then as we get further into it, we also realize that really the Bardo Thodol is a specialized teaching connected with advanced Buddhist meditation that works on many levels beyond basic mindfulness, depending upon the practice and the realization of both the reader and the person it's being read for. So whether you're a Vajrayana practitioner, like I am, focused mainly on generation or completion practices, or a Dzogchen or Mahamudra practitioner, what you're really working towards is full embodiment of the three kayas. And so this is where I find this pivot happens that's represented by the green arrow. When my attention shifts from the outer environment of my body in the physical world to the inner environment of my mind. And here I'm calling it the inner environment for non-meditation, because practices at this level tend to be less about doing things to achieve enlightenment than they are about removing obscurations that keep us from realizing we already are enlightened and keep us from relating to the world from an enlightened perspective. So this time, bringing the mind home means something different than focusing on the here and now as it did before. It's turning within, looking at the mind itself, seeing its true nature and how it's been distorted. And in my case, definitely seeing how confused I've become and how much suffering has resulted, my own and others. So I use mindful awareness to look within. And when any of us look within, we see, we reconnect with and come to trust our inner seeing, inner hearing, and inner voice. At this point, some people turn to specific inner yoga practices to help fine-tune their inner senses through visualization and vibrationalization methods. But others simply practice resting in the nature of mind. And in such ways, gradually ordinary perception gives way to a purer perception. It emerges on its own as ignorance and confusion dissolves. I'm sure we've all had that experience when it seems like the sun is emerging from behind dark clouds. And really letting it happen is all we need to do. But at least speaking for myself, that can be very difficult since I'm very much in the habit of trying to control and manipulate situations. Next is to release. And again, this now means something different than before. As glimpses of our true nature become more frequent and sustained, one's certainty grows. One comes to recognize aspects of our own enlightened nature. For example, in the myriad forms and characteristics of the peaceful and wrathful deities. We can surrender to these experiences without hope or fear. As layer after layer of fog of ordinary mind dissolves, we can trust that transpersonal cosmic awareness is finally revealed. We fully relax when every last trace of the thinker or observer dissolves into that boundless unified awareness. The sweet analogy that I have to be content with until it happens for me, that captures the bliss of this ultimate relaxation, is that it's like a child running into its mother's lap. So we can see how perhaps Vajrayana and Dzogchen or Mahamudra practices prepare one to be able to recognize and make use of more and more of the many Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya liberation opportunities in the Bardo Thodol. And through deity yoga practices, for example, the sounds and sights of the peaceful and wrathful deities become familiar and less frightening. We actually see them through different eyes and hear them through different ears, and we're capable of relating to them differently. I guess most simply put, we notice more of the chances for liberation. We can recognize the sacred space and energies in it, and are less likely to defeat ourselves by turning away from them. As before, there's probably benefit to more than the reader. If a Vajrayana or Dzogchen Mahamudra student is reading the Bardo Thodol for someone who passed, who has a similar practice, there might be a resonance that could be helpful to that person, as the reader not only reads the words, but creates the visualizations and meaningfully chants the mantras. The reader is in essence creating a practice environment that is familiar to and supports the deceased, reminding them of things from their practice that might help them connect to pure awareness. So I hold all that in mind when we're doing the reading of the Bardo Thodol together. And I also keep in mind the very inspiring thought that there are indeed masters walking this earth who have attained a very high level of realization. And they can be at the bedside of the deceased, or even remotely, they may be able to enter the luminous flow of transcendent awareness and find and communicate with the consciousness of the deceased, thereby easing their distress and helping them during their journey through the Bardos. For these masters, The Bardo Thodol is not a map the way it is for most of us. It's the actual territory, and they know how to enter it and navigate it. It is indeed holy ground, Emaho. So that's what I wanted to share for what it's worth, because I've been using this quick little sequence and reverse sequence, and just wanted you to have a little sense of, for me, what more is behind it. And I hope it's helpful.
Oh, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or comments about Debbie's offering?
Where did that come from, Debbie? Hello, this is Adrian.
Oh, hi, yeah. The reverse part of it, so the second slide of the inner environment, you'll find in chapter 5 of Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. Sogyal Rinpoche talks about it. And it was actually in Rigpa where I learned how to reverse and do the outer environment sequence as a setup to a basic sitting practice. They would often call us together, have us sitting and just say, relax, release, and bring the mind home. And we all knew through the associated teachings what that meant, which I was just sharing a bit of.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome.
Louisa?
Thank you, Debbie. That was very well explained, and I really appreciate that. I wanted to say that when I first started meditating many, many years ago, I always meditated with going into the meditation after I relaxed and released with an intention. But years ago, I stopped doing that because it didn't bring me into a sacred space like you mentioned. It just brought me to a point where I was, okay, waiting for a response or an answer of some sort. And that didn't work for me for very long. So now, like you mentioned, I go into my practice, my meditation, looking to go to that sacred space and not think about having any intention in my mind to get an answer for something or, listen for a message. So it's worked much, much, much better for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's the whole idea, to find what works for you. And for me, the sacred space comes from that compassionate motivation. It's from bodhicitta, and it's there. You're right. It's not in the words. It's not in the thoughts of how you're setting it up. It's the heart.
Right. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thomas, I think, was trying to say something earlier. Did you want to add something, Thomas? No, maybe not. Your microphone is muted if you're trying to speak.
Yes, the host muted me.
Oh, okay.
So as I was listening, it was though, in a sense, Debbie was reading something that she had prepared. And I was wondering if she has a PDF of what she was reading, and if she does, if she could share it with us.
I was, because I actually was working on this at the hospital yesterday while Skip was in surgery, knowing that I would be absolutely exhausted today. I would be happy to share it.
Thank you very much.
Sure. And the slides too. I'll get those sent along.
Thank you.
Lance, I'm going to put the opening prayer back up and find the mantra.
So at this point, if we can recite the liberation mantra, with the melody, and we will use, we can join Garchen Rinpoche in his, with the Sangha in reciting this. So we'll do about 30 rounds of this, 30 rounds of the cycle, but not 30 30 rounds of the mala beads, but about half of a mala bead round. So let me see here. Oh, we can't do both, unfortunately. So it says here. So you can see that we're going to recite Om Mani Padme Hung Shri, and the white light from the Om going to the God realm, the green Ma going to the jealous God realm, or the Azura realm, the yellow Ni going to the human realm, the light blue Pad going to the animal realm, and the red May going to the hungry ghost realm, and the blue, dark blue Hung going to the hell realms, all circling round the white Shri seed syllable, which represents the primal cause, or primal cause of liberation for all beings. So if you can keep that in your mind, and this follows the 6 sages. If you remember back, last month, 2 months ago, when we were talking about the peaceful deities, and we were talking about the 6 sages, the 6 Buddhas, who each one is in one of the realms. So it follows the white is in the God realm, the green is in the demigod realm, the yellow is in the human realm, the light blue is in the animal realm, the red is in the hungry ghost realm, and the dark blue is in the hell realms. Excuse me. So now I'm going to change this so we can go to this. Can everyone hear this?
Yes.
So if you can join with the chanting without your microphone being on, is be very good, and be thinking of all the beings in the Bardo, in the realms, liberating them. In particular, to think of Katie's mother. Her name is Diane Adele. If we can keep her in mind, is wonderful. Mani Padme Hum. Om 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 Mani Padme Hum Shri. Thank you all very much. Okay, now back to the Bardo Thodol book. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything that we did last week or weeks before? Anything that you want to bring up before we begin again?
I have a question, Lance.
Yes.
Um, is there something in Tibetan teaching about, like, when you pass away, some of your energy maybe stays behind? Like, not everything, is part of the conscious bindu that leaves or whatever. Have you heard something like this? Sometimes I don't know if this is like I don't know if I heard this from Tibetan medicine or if I am mixing it up with something else.
I don't recall hearing anything like that. Now, as we get further into this part 3 of the becoming rebirth, maybe you'll see something in there that reminds you of that, but I don't recall anything like that.
Okay, thanks.
So if you do hear of something like that, whether it's in the Bardo Thodol or some other place, I'd like to hear about it. That's interesting.
Are you talking about residual karma?
No, it's like I think, oh gosh, I think I really don't know if I'm mixing up Chinese medicine or Tibetan medicine. I don't know. That there's like, part of your spirit, soul, energy, consciousness. They're different parts.
Well, before we get too far down this, let's stay with stuff that we do know.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because you start getting into these anecdotal, nebulous things, and people start holding on to things that might necessarily not be there.
Yes.
So I hope you appreciate that.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, what do you think about people who feel like they see their loved ones who've passed on? They see that they feel that they see them, they've come to visit them or something.
It's all in the mind.
Okay.
And the mind is part of phenomenal nature. That's a fundamental understanding. It's a fundamental realization that the mind is another concept. Okay. So what we've been talking about here up to this point was the mental body that has now fallen away out of the Bardo of reality, not completely, but is moving further and further away, as now into the Bardo of becoming. And in Bardo of becoming, then here in the Bardo Thodol, it is reminding the person who has passed and us as the reciter and the practitioner of what has been going on, and reminding us and putting it into more clear terms as to what's happening in terms of Buddha nature, talking about Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, and so on. And then here on page 165 that we talked about last time, it mentioned, let me see, if we start on page 164, the last sentence on page 164 that carries over to 165, it says, this indivisible, naked, unclouded, and exposed awareness, present as it is right now, is a natural, uncontrived state, is the Buddha body of essentiality. Furthermore, the natural expressive power of this Buddha body of essentiality is the compassionate Buddha body of emanation, which arises everywhere without obstruction. So this term, the Buddha body of essentiality, may be the first time that you've heard it. And in the glossary of the Gourmet Dorje book, the book that this all comes from, it's not a precise listing in the glossary, but it is under the Buddha body classification. And it talks about it as the Swabhavika Kaya body of the Buddha. So many of you may not have heard of that. But what this is like, it is the co-emergence of the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya, all coming together in this co-emergent expression, this co-emergent wisdom, this co-emergent arising that is in the navel center. And it is like the strength now of all these kayas. It is, as it says here, it says, this is a compassionate Buddha body of emanation, which arises everywhere without obstruction. So this essentiality is the essential nature of the completion of becoming Buddha. So this is speaking in terms of, this is what we missed the opportunity to do. But from the point of view of the reader, we have the benefit to be able to go back and study and go back and practice and go back and become the embodiment of this co-emergent Buddha body of essentiality, the Swabhavika Kaya. So I hope that brings a little bit of a question to your mind, that you want to understand this a little bit more. So if you have this book, if you have the Gourmet Dorje book, if you go to page 450, at the bottom it says Buddha body, and then carries over to page 451, and you'll see all the entries in that glossary that regard the Buddha body. And so it's good study material. Any questions about this? Okay. I know we're getting into more esoteric things.
I'll be back. Okay.
Adrian, you were about to say something and somebody else was trying to say something. Adrian?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get muted. I guess might be better if I read that material, Lance, because I do have a lot of questions about that.
All right, well, good. We'll read it and contemplate it, and then we can talk about it next time or whatever. And yeah, so this is giving us food to educate ourselves, isn't it? We can't expect that our experience here of trying to figure this out on our own is going to help very much, because if we don't have an educated process, then we're likely to go down many wrong paths.
But my only question for tonight is this: Kaya a result of our passing through the Bardo?
No.
Oh.
It is something we do as part of the completion stage of meditation. Okay. So here I'm going to read, I'm on page 165 of the Bardo Thodol. And now I'm going to read the next section, which we read last week, but I'm going to read it again to kind of get our minds focused a little bit. O child of Buddha nature, Ricky Boo, Kunchuk Pema Dorje, listen to me now and do not be distracted. By merely recognizing the essential nature of your experience in the above way, now, and do not be distracted by merely recognizing the essential nature of your experience in the above way, you will attain perfect Buddhahood endowed with these 4 Buddha bodies. Do not be distracted. The division between Buddhas and sentient beings is determined by this recognition. If you are distracted at this critical moment, the opportunity to escape from the swamp of suffering will be lost. It is said of this very moment, in an instant, penetrating analysis is made. In an instant, perfect Buddhahood is attained. So going back to Adrian's just question was, is this something that you experience? Is this something you accomplish in the Bardo? Well, it says here that you can, but the point I'm making is, how can you recognize this if you haven't developed this to some extent in the Bardo of living? So maybe there are those who can. I shouldn't say that it's, it's definitely not that way. But for most of us, I think that we need to be able to develop all this during this lifetime, or in lifetimes to come, as a ordinary human being who is on the path to become an enlightened being, a bodhisattva and a Buddha. But the point it does make here, which is a very important point, is in an instant, penetrating analysis is made. In an instant, perfect Buddhahood is attained. So what that means is that in an instant, enlightenment can come. We work at enlightenment as a gradual process, but that moment that it comes is just like that. And then all of a sudden it's there. Now, how stable can we maintain that? Can we have that glimpse? And can that glimpse remain with us, or does that glimpse begin to fade? Because we do not have the tools to be able to maintain our one-pointed mindfulness of emptiness, of not being attached to anything, including this glimpse of enlightenment. So I know that sounds a little strange, but it is an experience. So we need to allow ourselves to have the experience, has always been the point. So now we begin where we left off on page 166. Until yesterday, because you were distracted, even though so many aspects of the intermediate states have arisen, you did not attain recognition. Up to this time, you have experienced so much fear and terror. Now, if you continue to be distracted, the lifeline of compassion suspended to you will be cut off, and you will move on to a place where there is no immediate prospect of liberation, So be careful. So going back and talking about, when we were in the Bardo of reality and we were going through the wrathful deities and we went through these levels, if you will, and we went through the Harukas, and then we went through the Matara, and we went through the Pasachi, and then we went into the Ishvara, and they were all there to help us, but at this point now, we're losing that help. We passed through that now. And now we are headed, without any ability to get back. There's no tether to pull us back. Only maybe what is within ourselves, if we can be reminded for that. So we'll continue this on and see. So it says, be careful. O child of Buddha nature, Rikibu, Kunchok Bema Dorje. If you do not now know how to meditate, you should call to mind the Buddha, the sacred teachings, the sublime assembly of monks and nuns, the meditational deity, Mahakarunika, and pray to them. Meditate on all the fearful and terrifying appearances as being forms of Mahakarunika, or your meditational deity. Remember your spiritual teacher, and remember the name which you received during empowerment ceremonies in the human world. Say this name, Rikibu, to Yamadama Raja. Do not be afraid of him. Know that even if you were to plunge down over the precipices, you would not be harmed. So abandon your fear and terror. So what this is saying, what is the common thread through this section right here, this paragraph right here, is saying remembering. What are you going to remember? If you haven't developed something to remember, then what are you going to do? So whether it's Mahakarunika, whether it's your spiritual master, maybe it's the Christ, maybe it's Mohammed, maybe it's an Islamic, deity or master. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Buddha. It may actually be a Buddha, but a Buddha by a different name. Maybe that's a better way of describing it. We would describe it as a Buddha, and it has all these different characteristics. But Buddha is not exclusive. It's not exclusive to liberation. Is not exclusive to Buddha, Buddhism, to the Dharma. There's many Dharmas. There can be a Christian Dharma. There can be a Hebrew Dharma. There can be a Hindu Dharma, and so on. And if the devotion that we have towards that is as real, as powerful as the devotion that we would have to the Buddhist Dharma, then liberation is certainly, possible. It's certainly there, available. So it's not an exclusive group. Anybody got a comment about that or anything that I just said? Excuse me.
Lance, I'm struggling with the line about the lifeline of compassion will be cut off. And is that because at this point, we're just so lost in our fears and projections that we just don't see the lifeline? It's hard to imagine coming this far with all of the different opportunities for liberation that the lifeline is actually cut. But am I just not understanding something?
Well, that's the way it is translated here. So, I think maybe, think of an analogy of this, think how much of we had to work for us as ordinary human beings to recognize that we have a spirituality that is based in loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. So here, and we've had to develop that, but it's been there the whole time, but we didn't recognize it. So now we're falling away from the pure essence of that, from the pure spirituality of that in the Bardo of reality. And if we didn't recognize it in the Bardo of reality, when we fall away from it, are there going to be tendrils that still maybe we can cling on to or something like that? But the further we get away, as a metaphor, the less we're going to be able to attach to those things. And if we haven't developed the recognition of that, or developed the remembrance to find that, then how are we going to, what are we doing? We're groping for this. This is just a mental body. A mental body that has no understanding of the spirit. Otherwise, it would have stayed in the Bardo of reality. And remember again, we've been there many times. And as the story of the Buddha goes, and as the story of those who have enlightenment, that we recognize past lives, then we've been there many times. And if we haven't gotten to a point where we can begin to conceptualize what that means in some degree, then it just means that we got more practice to do.
When you mentioned that line in there about the precipice and not being afraid,
Yes.
The thought that came to my mind was Tilopa's instruction to Naropa to jump off the building, not be afraid.
Well, what this was in reference to, that may have been part of it, but what this is a reference to, if you go back to page 162. So 162, that paragraph there in the middle of the page, it talks about that our innate good conscience and our innate bad conscience begin the battle for control. And they are battling by counting the white pebbles and the black pebbles. The white pebbles of our good deeds and the black pebbles of our bad deeds. And this is our consciousness. This is our innate consciousness of a mental body that is playing this game with itself. And don't we do that sometimes? When we're contemplating, what death is, and maybe not now, but maybe years ago, before we knew anything about this, we say, "Oh, I'm going to meet God." And is God going to, he's going to open up the book and he's going to say, "Oh, here's Lance, and here's all the things he did during his lifetime. Here's all the good things and here's all the bad things. And I'm going to make a determination, being God, where I'm going to go." But actually, this is within ourselves. We come to realize that this is within ourselves.
I never had those thoughts.
So
Lance.
the precipices, excuse me. So let me bring it back to the point of the precipices. So it says, wait a minute. Sorry. That was page 162. Sorry, I'm looking for the part where it brings up the precipices.
Top of page 167.
167. If you were to plunge down the precipices, yeah, but the precipices where they were described. Well, the three precipices are ignorance, our desire, and our anger. That if we're following those, if those are what is controlling us, and we're falling off the precipice of ignorance or delusion, or we're falling off the precipice of anger or hatred, or we're falling off the precipice of aversion, hatred, desire, attachment. So, and if you've ever made a decision and you start falling further and further away from reality because you start chasing some delusion, and you start chasing some desire, you start chasing some hatred. It's like falling off of a precipice, and you just keep going. And you say, "Oh, I got to keep going." What am I going to do?
That's,
So
I
that's
think
what-
you're looking for the bottom of 158, top of 159.
Top of 159. Yes,
Bottom of-
thank you very much. Yes, thank you
Bottom of
very much.
158, yeah.
The bottom of 158, where it talks about the three precipices. Yes, and it goes over to 159, and then it's referred back to again on page 162. And then again, and on page one, where were we? 166, 167. Yes. So it's important to read this as a whole, uninterrupted. We've had to interrupt this, but your study, your contemplation of this should be in one sitting, and trying to digest all this at one time and doing it many times over. You're going to read it one time, you're going to get something out of it. You come back the next time, you read it again. You're going to purify a little bit more of what you understand about that. And you do it over and over and over again. And so it becomes a contemplation, a complete contemplation about what is being said here. So being fragmented like this is not the best way to do it. Okay, somebody had a question before, was going to make a comment. I think it was Adrian.
Yeah, I did have a question. I don't think it's that important, Lance. I was just going to ask if the inner consciousness that you're talking about is the same thing as the inner wisdom. When you're talking about the bad, good inner consciousness battling, was that like the same concept as karma?
It could be,
Wisdom.
yeah. It could be. It could be, it's our klesha consciousness. The seventh consciousness, our klesha consciousness, and the alaya consciousness, together, working together, because those are still active, in this mental body. That's why we need to understand these eight consciousness of a human being.
The good and the bad are just concepts.
Or what?
The good and the bad are just concepts.
Well, of course, yes. And so are we still consider we're holding on to those concepts? Yes. That's why we need to practice non-conceptuality. It doesn't come easily, but actually it's what is our natural state. And that sounds like a real paradox, doesn't it?
Or a bad consciousness would basically be ignorance, for example, because that's
Would be what?
ignorance.
Ignorance? Well, it can be any of those things.
Mhm. Because we
But
cannot
we can
see.
attach, but the point is we can attach, or we can have fear, or we can have delusion of any of those emotional afflictions, those afflictive emotions. So it's the dualism. And that's what it's referring to when it's talking about the good consciousness, the bad consciousness, is talking about our innate, predilection for dualism.
Right.
So here's another way it's manifest.
Makes sense.
If we were one-pointed mindfulness, if we were non-conceptual, we would have stayed in the Bardo of reality. We wouldn't have gotten this far. You got to look at this very practically.
Say that again.
I say you have to look at the Bardo Thodol as something that is very practical. You know, it's not just for, you know, this esoteric, you know, reading for those who are in the afterlife. It is for us in this life to be able to prepare ourselves to be able to liberate from this life or the afterlife.
But back up a little bit. You said the Bardo of reality, but we escaped that, and here we are.
Well, the Bardo of reality is where the peaceful deities and where the wrathful deities are. That's the Bardo of reality. That's the fifth Bardo. There's 6 Bardos, remember? So the fifth Bardo is the Bardo of reality. It's the other side of our hand. It's the other side of the Bardo of living. And what we begin to recognize is all that reality is real in this life. We can see it all here.
So if you didn't discern good or bad, if you didn't make those judgments, that would be, if such a thing is possible, that would be the position or the point of view of a Buddha.
Correct. So is a Buddha possible in this Bardo of living?
Not to get too far astray, but when Arjuna was conflicted about going into battle, Krishna said they're all, because he would go into battle against his friends, and Krishna said they're already dead.
Well, right.
Nobody's-
Well, it's a spiritual battle that they're engaged in. You're talking about the Bhagavad Gita, and
Yes.
that's a spiritual battle that Arjuna is engaged in.
The battle with his thoughts, the
Correct.
battle with the conceptual mind.
Correct.
And if he were non-conceptual, then he wouldn't, then he could perform the action that Krishna advised.
Then he would be at the Godhead in terms of Krishna consciousness.
Amen. Onward with the Bardo.
Okay. So let me see. So I think we're back on page 167, right? So it says, "Know now, even if you were to plunge down over the precipices, you will not be harmed. So abandon your fear and terror." So what this is saying is you're in this Bardo of becoming, but there is an awareness of this. And we're developing a sense of responsibility to becoming now. We've missed the opportunity to be liberated, but now we have to take on the responsibility of what comes next. This is where we are, becoming the architects of our next life. So abandon your fear and terror. Remember, it's all just emptiness, it's all just figments of our imagination. But it also means to us, as we look at it right now, we say, oh my God, I got another 80 years of this to go through. But to that being, it's like this. What's 80 years? So we're seeing that we're going to be born again. Now, what are we going to be born as? And taking responsibility for that. That's what we're trying to understand now in this part 3. So we go to the next paragraph here. It says, "Oh, child of Buddha nature, Rikibu, Kunchokpe Medorje, your present perceptions can, like a catapult, in an instant, cast you into the most awesome states, either blissful or full of suffering. Therefore, now it is critical that your perceptions are not colored by either attachment or aversion. So what this is saying is, look, you still have an opportunity for purity, for purification, for pure nature. It may be that you are about to take birth in the higher realms. Yet, at a time when the perceptions of the higher realms occur, your living relatives, now left behind, are sacrificing and offering many animals on your behalf, dedicating this activity to you, the deceased. Corrupted perceptions will thus arise, and consequently, an intense aversion may well up within you, and this will form a connecting link to a birth in the hell realms. Therefore, whatever activities occur in the place that you have left behind, meditate on loving kindness and ensure that aversion does not arise. So, part of this is cultural. This was written, 12, 13, 1400 years ago. And so, it's talking about that you have the ability to recognize, to see your family, or that you're still, have that attachment to your family, and they're doing these things. They're making these offerings, killing, and having these meals and so on, and that you are either enjoying it or you have an aversion to it, and it's contaminating your purity while you're in this state of a mental body that is becoming another being, that is becoming a new being. So it's saying that in this, you have a potential to be attracted to this, but be strong. Don't let yourself be attracted to this. To take it even more literally, or maybe that's the wrong word, but to take it even more immediately, when you're on the cushion, you're meditating now in this mind, and you're thinking, you're going through your meditation and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I just had this meditation. Oh, and I was really deep in this meditation. It was a beautiful meditation. I was truly in a meditative mind. I was in a samadhi, but something brought me out of that samadhi. Was it a good thought or was it a bad thought? In either case, it brought you out of the samadhi. And now you got to deal with that. Now I'm still on the cushion. And now, I just had this meditation. I just had this samadhi. But now I'm conflicted because of this positive thing or this negative thing that I'm making an evaluation about now. And how do I relate this? How do I think about this meditation? Was it a good meditation or was it a bad meditation? Or can we begin to recognize these things and say, oh, I was in that samadhi. Something pulled me out of the samadhi, but can I go back into the samadhi? Do I have the technique? Do I have the skillful means? Do I have the strength and the courage to go back into the samadhi? Or do I just let myself flow in whatever direction I've allowed myself to flow from? I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So now, page 168. Alternatively, your mind may grow attached to your wealth and possessions, now left behind, or else knowing that your wealth and possessions are being enjoyed and owned by others, you may become both attached to those worldly goods and also hateful towards those left behind who are using your possessions. As a result of this, a connecting link will certainly be formed to a birth amongst the hell beings or amongst the anguished spirits, even though you may have been at the point of attaining birth in one of your higher realms. However attached you may be to the wealth and left behind, you may not have the ability to enjoy it. Since it is absolutely of no use to you, abandon your attachment and yearning for the wealth you left behind. Let it go. Be decisive. Regardless of who is enjoying your wealth, do not be possessive. Let it go. Cultivate devotion and imagine that you are offering these worldly possessions to your spiritual teacher and to the three precious jewels. Rest in a state free from attachment and free from clinging. So we're telling this, of course, to the being who is in the Bardo states, the mental body. We're guiding them. How does it relate to us in the meditation and our samadhi? You know, we may be pulled away from delusion. We may be pulled away by hatred. We may be pulled away by aversion. We may be pulled away by jealousy. We may be pulled away by greed. What were those 5 things I just said? The 5 root poisons that affect us every single day as an ordinary human being, but also affect us in this meditative state, in the Bardo here. So we need to be able to cut these things off. We need to be able to know how to liberate ourselves from these thoughts. And at this point, what we need to do is to be able to just simply cut them off. It's not, we're beyond the point of rationalization with these things. We just got to say, oh, I know that thought. I'm not going to have that thought. I'm just stopping. So again, all this needs to be contemplated. You need to read this in a single sitting, time after time, to really get the understanding of this. But always remember that we're reading it to someone else, but just as important, if not more important for us right now, we're reading it to ourselves. We're developing this on the cushion. So then once again, at the bottom of page 168, once again, even when the Kankani Dharani incarnation for the dead is being recited for you and the purification of the lower realms, the Sarva Dugate Pari Sadhana Tantra is being recited on your behalf, you may perceive with your present subtle cognitive ability that these rites are being performed impurely and distractedly, and that those who are performing these rituals are impure in both their commitments and vows and are careless in their conduct. So what this means is, what all this is what we are going through now, reading these prayers, the Kankani Dharani, incantation, and the Sarva Dugate Parisadhani Tantra. This is the Bardo Thodol. These are these prayers that we are reciting and so on, and are being done on our behalf. But it's saying here, well, maybe you're recognizing these, you're seeing these because you have clairvoyant power and you're able to see those who are doing it, but they're not doing it right by your estimation. So you're building up anger towards them. You're building up aversion to them. And it's contaminating whatever purity you're trying to maintain in this state. So we can't think of it when we're on the cushion. We can't think of it in this situation either. We're telling the person who is in the Bardo not to be paying attention to those who are reciting this for them in their behalf, not to be paying attention to the details of this. You know, if we're getting into the details, if we're getting into where we're starting to think about what they're thinking, who's reciting this, and their purity, we're contaminating ourselves. If they're creating light for us, if they're showing us light, we just follow the light and don't think about other things about it. Don't try and figure out their expectations. Don't try and figure out their intentions, their motivations, whether they're pure or impure. It's gone, is what this is saying. And back to the book, it says, as a result of this, a connecting link will certainly be formed to a birth amongst the hell beings or amongst the anguished spirits, or even though you may have been at this point of attaining birth in one of the higher realms. However attached you may be to the wealth now left behind, you may not now have the ability to enjoy it. Since it is absolutely of no use to you, abandon your attachment and yearning for the wealth you left behind. Let it go. Be decisive. Regardless of who is enjoying your wealth, do not be possessive. Let it go. Cultivate devotion and imagine that you are offering these worldly possessions to your spiritual teacher and to the three precious jewels. Rest in a state free from attachment, free from clinging. So here now, from a practical point of view, in this life, this is why we are developing the rituals of offerings, why we have altars, why we are making all the offering mudras, why we are doing all this, offering flowers and food and all these things. We are rehearsing, we are practicing. If we are holding back from making these offerings, what do you think you're going to do when you're in the Bardo? You think then all of a sudden you're going to get generous? So that's why we do these ritual things. These ritual things are mindfulness practices that are stabilizing our one-pointed mindfulness on devotion, of bodhicitta. That we're doing this, we're offering this to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas don't need this. They don't need these things. But the work that the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas do, that's what we need to be able to do. So what we're doing is we're feeding ourselves. We're offering these things to ourselves so that we become the great Bodhisattvas, so that we become the great Buddhas. We're feeding ourselves with this generosity, with this courage. So we have to look at it from a different point of view. If we look at it from the selfish point of view of being a human being, why am I doing this? We would say to ourselves. But we have to look at it from the point of view of becoming a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, a holy enlightened being. And not all this stuff is just temporary, but all this stuff we're giving to all beings. So it's a real turning your head around. It's changing the way you think. It's changing your attitudes towards possessions, towards your life, towards your body, towards your possessions. And this is how, we've talked many times about going around in circles and that circle being a spiral and getting tighter and tighter. And as it goes up, as that spiral goes up, it gets simpler. There's less things to be attached to. There's less things to have aversions to. We become more ascetic naturally because we want to be, because we know that's a purer way to be. There's nothing to hold on to. I don't need that baggage. I don't need that stuff. You may not want to go down that path. You may say, oh, well, that's not for me. What it means I'm going to give up my nice house. I'm going to give up my cars. I'm going to give up, my books. I'm going to give up all this stuff I do. And what happens is you do it because that's what you want to do. That's what you need to do. It's the natural thing to do. Because I'm giving up, I'm letting go of all this, what it is to be a human being, what it is to be in this life. That we're going to the Buddha realm, to the Buddha field. Something that is non-conceptual, beyond our imaginations. Thomas, you wanted to say something?
Yes, if you can't do it when you die, it's done for you.
Well, it's only done temporarily. You know, it's done for that life. That's true. But what do you take back with you? So maybe going back to Sandy's point about the residual, maybe that's the residual. Maybe that's the point of the residual. You know, it's what you've been holding on to, despite the fact that you died. It's the residual stuff that you kept in your life. Is Debbie still with us? I mean, excuse me, is Sandy still with us, or she? Looks like she. Okay.
Lance, if you wanted to comment on her question, I would be more than happy to listen.
Well, I don't have a comment about it because I've never heard that, but I was just going on about this idea, you know, is there this residual stuff that we're holding on to when we die? And maybe that's what she was referring to. Maybe that's what she had in her head. You know, I'd put it together like that, you know, just call it that, but you know, you could express it that way, that we're holding on to these residuals when we die. Thomas just said, when you die, you're leaving everything behind. No, you're taking all this stuff, you're taking stuff with you, but what you're taking with you is all the karmic imprints.
You're not taking your house with you.
You're not taking
taking
a
your
house,
car with
but you're taking your karmic imprints with you. And maybe those could be described as the residuals.
Relax for a moment.
Huh?
So I said, relax for a moment. So the exercise is there that we can let go of these things. But if we don't let go of them, then when we die, they're gone anyway. We might be attached to them in a Bardo, but physically, all that is gone. That's the reality.
Okay.
And we would experience that as painful if we hadn't done the kind of practices Lance is talking about.
Yeah, maybe so. So here, back again on page 168, it says, once again, oh, I already read that. Once again, then we're on page 169. Where did we leave off? Well, let me start again. Get back on page 168, this last paragraph says, once again, even when the Kankani Dharani incantation for the dead is being recited for you, and the purification of the lower realms, the Sarva Dugate Parisadhana Tantra is being recited on your behalf, you may perceive with your present subtle cognitive ability that these rites are being performed impurely and distractedly, and that those who are performing these rituals are impure in both their commitments and vows and are careless in their conduct. As a result, you may have no confidence in them. You may form a bad opinion of them. You may become fearfully and horribly aware of their negative past actions, etc., as well as their impure practice of the sacred teachings and the rituals. Feeling this, you will experience the utmost sadness and think, alas, they have betrayed me. They have truly betrayed me. As a consequence of your profound disenchantment, instead of maintaining purity of perception and feelings of respect, negative opinions and loss of confidence will arise within you. Thus, these perceptions and feelings will form a connecting link that will certainly propel you into the lower realms and lower existences. And in this way, your subtle cognitive ability and the rituals recited in your behalf will not have been of any benefit, but rather of great harm. So it's another illustration that we are truly alone here, and that we are easily contaminated. We may already be contaminated, and we have to cut ourselves off from those contaminations. So now, okay. So now bottom of page 169. However impure may be the practice of this sacred teachings by your friends now left behind, you must maintain respect and purity of perception from the depths of your heart. Let me repeat that. However impure may be the practice of the sacred teachings by your friends now left behind, you must maintain respect and purity of perception from the depths of your heart. Think to yourself, my own perception is so polluted. How could the speech of the Buddhas be impure? These impure perspectives have arisen as a consequence of my own impure perception and will appear to me just as the flaws on my face will be reflected in a mirror. As for these individuals performing the rituals in reality, their bodies are the sublime community of monks and nuns. Their speech is the genuine sacred teaching, and their minds are the essence of the Buddhas. Therefore, I take refuge in them. Thinking thus, whatever activities occur in the place that you have left behind, they will certainly be beneficial to you. It is extremely important to maintain this purity of perception. Do not forget this. So, are we being deluded? Are we allowing ourselves to be pulled along, deluded, developing these emotions, developing this anger and this attachment through our delusions by not recognizing what these prayers are and who is reciting them for us and the purity that is being brought our way? You know, it's like people that are cynical, you know, people that have hatred, people that are paranoid. You know, sometimes I have to say to them, why are you so paranoid? What did you do in a past life that made you so powerful, so fearful? Why are you so cynical? Why do you think that people are always trying to come after you or do bad things? What did you do in a past life that makes you think that everybody thinks like this? Because not everybody thinks like this. It's your thoughts that are thinking like this. You're the one who's paranoid. You're the one who's thinking about stealing something or having something stolen from you. Some people the thoughts don't even enter their mind. So that's why, you know, we need to be able to do these things. We need to be able to develop samadhi and all these things, but we need to do it in a pure environment. You know, once we get stable in it, we can go into an impure environment and, you know, we won't be polluted. But in the beginning, we've got to be able to protect ourselves. So now we go to this page 170, the bottom of page 170. It says, even if you are to be born in the lower existences, let me start. Even if you are to be born into the lower existences, yet you do not maintain purity of perception, and you perceive the relatives that you have left behind practicing the virtuous teachings, unstained by negativity, and you see your spiritual teachers and masters purely practicing the rituals with virtuous body, speech, and mind, you will feel great joy. Simply through this experience of great joy, even though they were about to fall into lower existences, even though you were about to fall into lower existences, this joy will form a connecting link and you will certainly turn back towards the higher realms. Since there is such a manifold benefit, do not now lapse into impure perception. It is extremely important to maintain purity of perception and to be unbiasedly devoted. So be careful. So, in other words, instead of thinking the worst, we think the best. Okay, anybody got any questions or comment before I go on? Is this making some sense? I mean, is there a wisdom here? Can you see this? Or is there something that is still obtuse? Is it just a matter of being able to study this and to contemplate this?
I recall something that may have been from the Course of Miracles. Said, always go for the highest thought.
Sure. The virtue. Okay. So now to help each day. So now this next prayer, page 171, is something that we would recite each day as we are going through this elucidation. So it says, "O child of Buddha nature, Rikibu, Kunchok Pema Dorje." In short, since your awareness during this intermediate state lacks any material support, it is light and volatile, and therefore, whatever virtuous or non-virtuous perceptions arise, these are very powerful. Do not be absorbed by your non-virtuous thoughts. Call to mind the virtuous practices of your past. Even if you did not engage in virtuous practices during your life, maintain purity of perception and deep devotion. Pray to your meditational deity or to Mahakarunika, and with a powerful longing, repeat the following aspirational prayer. So this goes to the point that we were talking early on in the conversation was, do you have to be a Buddhist to be able to receive benefit from this? So here it's making a point, and I think Debbie made this point, that whether they're a Buddhist or not, it's to relax in the Bardo, calm down. There's a lot of stuff going on. Calm down. You're sending out this compassionate, comforting light to those beings and so on. So this loving kindness, this compassion should be going to all beings. However they interpret it, is you have no control over, but you're going to send this out no matter what. So now the prayer. Now when I roam alone, separated from my loved ones, and myriad images of emptiness arise, naturally manifesting, may the Buddhas quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the fear of the awesome and terrifying intermediate state be annulled. When I experience suffering as the result of negative past actions, may the meditational deity Mahakarunika dispel all such misery. And as the natural sound of reality reverberates like 1,000 peals of thunder, may all sounds be transformed into the resonance of the 6 syllables, Om Mani Padme Hum. When I am driven on by past actions, unable to find a refuge, may the great compassionate one, Mahakarunika, protect me. As I experience the suffering of habitual tendencies and past actions, may the meditative stabilities of inner radiance and bliss naturally arise. And then we repeat this 3 times. It says further, say this aspirational prayer with ardent longing. It will certainly lead you onto the path. Be absolutely certain that this aspirational prayer will not deceive you. This is most important. Recite many times, Om Mani Padme Hum. So now everybody's got your microphones muted. That's fine. Recite out loud along with me. I'm going to recite this 2 more times. And everybody, please recite this out loud. When I roam alone, separated from my loved ones, and myriad images of emptiness arise, naturally manifesting, may the Buddhas quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the fear of the awesome and terrifying intermediate state be annulled. When I experience suffering as the result of negative past actions, may the meditational deity, Mahakarunika, dispel all such misery. And as the natural sound of reality reverberates like 1,000 peals of thunder, may all sounds be transformed into the resonance of the 6 syllables, Om Mani Padme Hum. When I am driven on by past actions, unable to find a refuge, may the great compassionate one, Mahakarunika, protect me. And as I experience the suffering of habitual tendencies and past actions, may the meditative stabilities of inner radiance and bliss naturally arise. Now, when I roam alone, separated from my loved ones, and myriad images of emptiness arise, naturally manifesting, may the Buddhas quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the fear of the awesome and terrifying intermediate state be annulled. When I experience suffering as the result of negative past actions, may the meditational deity, Mahakarunika, dispel all such misery. And as the natural sound of reality reverberates like 1,000 peals of thunder, may the sounds be transformed into the resonance of the 6 syllables, Om Mani Padme Hum. When I am driven on by past actions, unable to find a refuge, may the great compassionate one, Mahakarunika, protect me. And as I experience the suffering of habitual tendencies and past actions, may the meditative stabilities of inner radiance and bliss naturally arise. So now in your best voice, no matter how bad it is, recite with me. Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. 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 Om Mani Padme Hum Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. 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 Yep. Take a moment and just relax into the space of the Mahamudra of emptiness. Just feel the vibration. Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Okay. Anybody have anything to say? Any questions? Any comments?
An interesting session. Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Well then, Debbie, can we go to the dedication prayers, please? And we'll do the dedication of Amitabha to the brief prayer to be reborn in the Pure Land of Dewa Chen. Does anybody have any questions about this prayer? What the meaning of this prayer is? And remember that at the bottom where it says Teata Pensa Driva Avobodhanaya Soha. This means this is it. The Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas of the 5 families and the 3 times who have destroyed all defilement lead to the equipoise of the enlightened mind. So all this deity yoga, all this that we are learning in the Bardo Thodol is all for the benefit of beings to be able to stabilize equipoise of the enlightened mind. Okay, Debbie, please.
Emaho. In the center is the marvelous Buddha Amitabha of boundless light. On the right side is Avalokiteshvara, the Lord of great compassion. On the left is Vajrapani, the Lord of powerful means. All are surrounded by limitless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Immeasurable peace and happiness is the blissful pure land of Dewa Chen. When I and all beings pass from samsara, may we be born in Dewa Chen without taking samsaric rebirth. May I have the blessing of meeting Amitabha face to face. By the power and blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, may I attain this aspiration without hindrance. Tayata Pensadriya Awa Bodhanaya Soha. Tayata Pensadriya Awa Bodhanaya Soha. Tayata Pensadriya Awa Bodhanaya Soha. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. By this virtue, may I achieve all knowingness, by defeating all enemies' confusion. May all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of suffering. As Manjushri the warrior realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings.
Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Om Ah Hum. Om Ah Hum. Om Ah Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lance.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Lance. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you.